On the BBC on Sunday, Laura Kuenssberg pushed Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden on why Keir Starmer appointed Peter Mandelson as US ambassador, given that he knew he'd maintained a close relationship with a convicted paedophile. And Pat McFadden had a curious response.
A regular appearer on a Times podcast, part of the BBC's election coverage.
But this is about the Prime Minister's decision.
I don't know if you put these questions to Peter Mandelson about
Secretary of State,
when you interviewed him before this or not. Maybe you did, but quite a lot of people didn't.
This is about the Prime Minister of this country's judgment to hire him to one of the most high-profile jobs in the country. And of course, the benefit of hindsight can be 2020. But the Prime Minister's curiosity seems to have fallen way, way short here.
Well, I believe the Prime Minister will have asked about this relationship. It sounds to me, and I can't know until everything's published, that Peter Mandelson will have enormously diminished it, portrayed himself as some kind of victim of being duped, rather than what's been revealed in the exchanges that we've seen. And, you know, even when you look at the BBC's coverage of the day that Peter Mandelson was appointed as the Prime Minister, there is no mention on it of Jeffrey Epstein.
But this is about the Prime Minister's judgment.
There are, in fact, political opponents welcoming it. And so the point I make this is not to say whataboutery or to point the finger at anyone else, but it is to make the point that at the time of the appointment, in many media circles, the issues of Jeffrey Epstein were not being raised.
This is about...
It's a good point. I mean, he's got a point there, right? I mean, it doesn't excuse the Labour Party, but the BBC didn't really raise it. Laura Kuenssberg has done many an interview with Peter Mandelson where she hasn't thought that Jeffrey Epstein was a particularly relevant thing to raise. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. So one, you know, Pat McFadden could be saying, look, this clearly wasn't a big issue. It clearly was reasonable to hire someone who had been a friend of a convicted paedophile for such an important role. And the proof of that is that the media didn't mention it because the media is the arbiter of what is significant. Obviously, the other interpretation is that the media and the Labour Party are both rotten. Some people, of course, were curious about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein long before the current email dump. One of them was Aaron Bastani. This is from January 2022. So long before Mandelson was appointed US ambassador. Shame on the BBC and any paper or network which interviews Peter Mandelson and doesn't ask about Jeffrey Epstein. That they don't, week after week, shows the moral decay at the heart of legacy media and Westminster politics. Disgusting. Now, obviously, if it had been Aaron Bastani interviewing Pat McFadden on Sunday, he wouldn't have been able to offer that riposte to Laura Kuenssberg, attempting some challenging questioning. Someone else who was on the ball on this was Rivka Brown, at the 2023 Labour Party conference.
Did you ride on the Lolita Express?
Do I what?
Did you ride on the Lolita Express? You didn't. You can confirm for the record. Why did Jeffrey Epstein call you Petey?
Look, lovely to talk to you, but I'm afraid I'm booked for...
Onto the Lolita Express.
Onto Times Radio, and they take precedence. Thank you very much indeed.
Great. I hope they ask you some very softball questions.
I hope so.
This is Aaron again in 2024. If Lord Mandelson is ever kind enough to grace the Novara Media Studios, we would, unlike the BBC, ask him about his friendship with the world's most famous paedophile. So this idea, you know, the first argument that Pat McFadden is making, that obviously this wasn't a big deal, otherwise people would have mentioned it. People were mentioning it. Maybe not Laura Kuenssberg, maybe not the Labour front bench, but there were plenty of people mentioning it. And it wasn't just people that worked at Novara Media. So one of the sort of legacy papers that sort of can stand tall, let's say, that hasn't been shown to be completely corrupt over the past week, is the Financial Times. So the paper interviewed Peter Mandelson in February last year. So that was just as he was made US ambassador. It was an interview with George Parker. This is from the article from February last year. We are on our way north on a high-speed Avanti train when I ask Mandelson about his relationship with Epstein. I regret ever meeting him or being introduced to him by his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, he says. I regret even more the hurt he caused to many young women. An icy chill descends in Carriage J. I'm not going into this. It's an FT obsession. And frankly, you can all fuck off, okay? So, I mean, George Parker looks better out of that exchange now. It was an FT obsession, a Novara media obsession. Maybe a few more people should have been obsessed.
I mean, clearly so. Clearly the public's imagination has been captured by this. I mean, Luke Trill from More in Common was saying that 95% of people they surveyed had heard of this issue. So it's clearly something that outside of the other political issues that may be categorised into the Westminster psychodrama that people don't care about, it's clear that the links between Mandelson and Epstein are of concern to the public. It's not just a case of things that only concern the Westminster class. It is also the case that people genuinely think that this reflects badly on the government, and it is widely known that it does. Speaking of the Financial Times, of course, it's Jim Pickard, their correspondent, who wrote the original piece detailing what they found in the JP Morgan report. It was released in 2019 for JP Morgan Chase, but the FT article was from 2023. He was the one who asked Keir Starmer about this in a press conference before the election. And he was interviewed about this by Sophie Rich on Sky News, specifically around questions that the mainstream media have to answer over this. So Farage was like, it's uncomfortable, but we need to talk about how this went uncovered broadly within the lobby for so long. And Jim Pickard said on screen, well, I had been screaming in my head for years about this. But as someone who streams regularly, I watch a lot of things like Laura Kuenssberg, and they would have Peter Mandelson on multiple times on their panel to comment on the issues of the day with whichever representative from the government or the opposition they've got on. And I'm going like, why aren't you asking him about Jeffrey Epstein? Why aren't you asking him about the report from JP Morgan Chase? And that's what Jim Pickard was saying to Sophie Ridge, that he was spending his time shouting at his telly, going, this is a serious issue. Why is nobody commenting on this? Why is no one concerned with this? And it's, of course, because Mandelson is somebody who's good for access. He's good to be able to ensure that you have links to the administration, because he is somebody who had links with lots of people. That's what he was known for as a political actor. And again, those links ended up being his downfall in the end. Things reached an incredibly surreal nadir on this particular issue. Of course, the Times are people who have been rightly condemning the Prime Minister for this appointment, have said things about the relationship and dumped a lot of the information which was originally published by Bloomberg about the birthday card, the birthday messages. And I'm like, hang on a minute. Didn't the Times Radio have a podcast hosted by Peter Mandelson for like a year, which he only left because he was going to be the US ambassador? They had a bunch of those podcasters defending having Peter Mandelson on the podcast last week. Again, something else I watched on stream, and I was looking at my screen open-mouthed, going, well, now you're all trying to cover for the fact that up until literally a couple of weeks ago, or potentially even September, depending on how scrupulous these media organisations are, where these links were never properly scrutinised, and even when they were scrutinised, no one took stock of the fact that they'd allowed it to go unscrutinised for so long. That they had spent time trying to be in good graces of the kind of people that Mandelson represented. And again, his connections go so far. This is going to be a big problem for the Labour Party as well, because he seems to have links to everybody within the party. So he's just somebody who is now tarnishing a lot of other people's reputations just by osmosis. And that's, again, a broader problem with our political class. It's all a system of mutually assured destruction based upon mutual links with each other, and based upon the fact that if you do want to scrutinise somebody who potentially might be good copy for your newspaper, it might mean less stories down the line, and that is a material incentive not to report on it until, again, the very last minute, when suddenly these people's careers are in tatters and you don't actually need them for access anymore because they've been removed from public life.
If you're impressed at Rivka being on this, ahead of the curve, asking Peter Mandelson these important questions in 2023, when he was still getting softball interviews from the likes of Laura Kuenssberg, you know what to do. You can sign up and support Novara Media at novaramedia.com/support. We do want to build this organisation to have more reporters on the beat so we can ask tough questions, which other people seem to just forget to do sometimes. They forget, they've got other things on their plate. And maybe he's hosting a podcast for their channel, for their radio station as well, who knows.